Our friend Charlie married a woman named Pamela. She was an older, refined, gentle Gentile from a small town in the Midwest who had old-fashioned conservative values and dressed accordingly in navy blazers and pearls. Oy. It was clear we had nothing in common, but I had to make the best of it because I loved Charlie. I have been through this too many times because, in case you haven't noticed, interesting men tend to marry dull women. I don't hear the men laugh. But Pam was a special challenge. How could I possibly be friends with a woman who hated garlic? Once, she told me about a dinner party where the hostess offered my dream menu, 3 different kinds of pasta. Pam was mortally offended. She served noodles. How cheap is that? Pam was a political junkie, whereas I have no interest in anything having to do with real life. Her favorite actor was Sir Laurence Olivier. She thought Brando was sloppy. And then one day she said, "So, Annie, tell me, do you happen to know anyone who's ever tried marijuana?" And that confirmed my suspicion that Pam and I live on separate planets. But over time, I began to realize that she did have some useful qualities. She was a professor of film history, women's studies, and great books. Plus, she wrote historical novels. In other words, Pam knew everything about everything. The Greeks, Darwin, Einstein, Shakespeare. This was very handy for somebody like me who knows nothing about nothing. And she allowed me to use her as my own personal Wikipedia. I could call her any time of the day or night and say, "Pam, what exactly did people eat for breakfast in the 16th century?" And she would say, "Well, Annie, were they a member of the feudal class or the peasant class?" And then off the top of her head, she would fill me in on all the details of the bread, cheese, mutton, and ale, which sounded a hell of a lot tastier than the slimy green jello she used to serve when I went to visit her. Then I thought, just to be courteous, I really ought to read one of her books. I chose The Shield of 3 Lions, which is about Richard the Lionhearted and the Crusades. What was I thinking? I was not looking forward to 500 pages of "God's feet, 'twas wondrous indeed." And then I got the shock of my life. The book was so bloody, so bawdy, so scatological. I couldn't believe it had been written by Miss Prim and Proper. Clearly, I had been too quick to judge her because clearly a person who writes about pissing and farting is a person worth knowing. So we started talking a few times a week about books, movies, family, travel, but I always dreaded the inevitable question. "So, Annie, tell me, what are you working on?" This drove me crazy because I had a secret shame, which was that I was never really working on anything. I always suspected I might be really smart and really funny, but I'd never figured out how to use that for anything other than being a depressed, mostly unemployed actress and a lively dinner guest. Pam seemed to expect more of me. So, At the ripe old age of blah, 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 I started looking around for something to do. I thought maybe I should try my own hand at writing. I started out with some personal stories, and Pam encouraged me to put them together and turn them into a show. I called it Yenta Unplugged. It took a long time to explain those two words. But she urged me on. I performed early versions in her living room, and when the show got produced, Pam was the first investor. I kindly returned the favor by causing her to lose every penny. Then I published some magazine articles and a book and created 2 more shows. I would not call myself a great success. I've got the bank account to prove that. But Pam gave me the gift of a vocation. And it's the engine that runs my life. Plus, there was an added bonus, unexpected. I discovered that Pam's conservative, old-fashioned values of discipline and diligence and productivity were a low-cost cure for depression. I dreamed of paying Pam back for all her support because I believe in the moral truths, not of the Old Testament, not of the New Testament, but of the Beatles, who preached, the love you take is equal to the love you make. I finally got my chance when Pam was having trouble finding a new literary agent, and I hooked her up with my old friend Julia, which worked out very well. Unlike me, Julia did have a lot in common with Pam. They were both Quakers married to Jews. They both shopped retail. And their idea of pop music was Gilbert and Sullivan. Pam was generous in many ways, but she grew absent-minded with age, which could lead to problems. Like one Christmas, she asked if I had enjoyed my present. What present? Apparently, she had sent me an assortment of New York delicacies from Zabar's, but she sent them to an old address where the new tenant signed for and received it. I gave Pam my current info, but the following year she sent the same package to the same old address. So for 2 years in a row, some scuzzball in Beverly Hills ate my Christmas locks. Pam passed away recently. It was not a tragic ending. She was in her 90s and had lived a full and fulfilling life, which is fine and dandy for her, but what about me? I miss her. I hate change of any kind, so death, not a fan. I mean, I don't know about you. At the memorial service, speaker after speaker after speaker described how Pam had taught them and encouraged them and inspired them. I found these people extremely annoying. I preferred to think that I was the only one who got her special attention. But I guess kind and generous people are kind and generous to everyone. When it was my turn to speak, I told how at the end of her life, Pam wasn't always alert enough to converse, so I would do all the talking, which is my favorite kind of conversation. But occasionally, the fog would lift, and we would catch a glimpse of the old Pam. And during those brief flashes of clarity, there was always that inevitable moment when she would say, "So Annie, tell me, what are you working on? Keep it going for the fabulous Amy Korzen. We're here.